Hey there, guys. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Tactic Talk Tuesday as we're kind of rebooting and taking a look at a lot of different rosters from now around the world. And I'm very excited to talk to Jacob today because he is by far one of the most well-minded about some of the numbers and statistics in this game, in part because of his own blog. Jacob, please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about what you've been doing for the MCP community.
So this all started when I got into the game back when it launched in November 2019, and I wanted to dig into some of the maths of it, and I started doing some calculations, and so then I thought, well, okay, I've got some interesting results here, and I started to share them with people in the form of a blog, which I named Xavier Protocols, picking up on the protocol in Marvel Crisis Protocol, and picking up something from the comics, from the X-Men, who I love and can't wait for. And it's kind of grown from there. I built a whole calculation spreadsheet, which if you haven't seen it, go and have a look. It's on the blog. The blog is xavier-protocols.com. And since then, I've been playing more and talking to more people and getting more experience. I've started not just doing maths articles, but strategy articles as well.
Yeah, and you've got several great articles. I could recommend everything from the Wakanda Waves one, which is very specifically built around just scenario, to you breaking down the numbers on a lot of characters and why some attacks are just going to be better in these different situations. If you were looking to just get better at the game from just a math and statistic point, not worrying about the exact positioning and stuff, I highly recommend you give a couple of his blogs a read, or articles to read, I guess, because it works really well to your advantage, and you just kind of are able to pick up a couple things to carry into your games. With that, yeah, absolutely, man. So with that said, I really want to know, since you know all of these numbers and kind of stuff, what you are running in your list today and all of that. And you build lists differently than I. I kind of lean toward, oh man, I like Captain America and Vision and Thor. Like, I love Thor as a comic book character, so I know I want to run Avengers. And you kind of take the opposite approach of me and look at the crisis cards first. I guess tell me a little bit about why that mentality comes into play, and then tell me about the crises.
Okay, so from my experience of playing the game, the thing that shapes the game the most is the secure crisis. That dictates after round one, so into round two and onwards, where are the characters going to be and what is the shape of the game going to broadly look like. Now, different games can be very different, but they have the same kind of structure to them broadly. Especially at the minute where we're recording right now, we've only got 4 secure crises available, whereas we've got 7 extracts. Having a game plan for 4 different shapes is much easier than having a game plan for 7 different possible extracts. And I think it's more impactful on when you're designing your list, thinking about, okay, how am I building to maximize the effect in this crisis with this setup that I've got in front of me?
Yeah, absolutely.
So with that in mind, you mentioned my Wakanda Wave article. That's a list I think is really strong. It takes a bit of practice to get used to it, but once you've got used to it, it can blow away people who aren't prepared for it, and it can give a really good game to anyone at that level. Now, for anyone who's not familiar with that, it's taking a core of Wakandan characters in gamma shelters at 15 threat. And the idea is you actually want 5 characters at 15 threat so that you can activate your opponent, so you're activating last, so you actively don't want priority, which is a strange thing for some people. Some people really struggle with that idea. What you're trying to do is you're trying to push and throw characters off those gamma shelters, and you're looking to score ideally the middle and the center gamma shelter in the first round, and then ideally all 3 across the board for the rest of the game. So then you're going, well, I get 3 in the first round, and then 6, and then 6. Well, that's 15. I only need to pick up 1 somewhere else in order to have won the game in round 3. The list I found that works really well with that, you've got Black Panther, clearly the leader of the Wakandans. He's pushing characters around with his strikes. You've got Shuri, who's pushing people around with her Panther gauntlets. Typically, Okoye is who you take there, because then that's your 3rd affiliated character. which you need to get to your 51% in a team of 5. Then your unaffiliated characters, the ones I found work the best, are Valkyrie. Slightly weirdly, lots of people think of her as a damaging character, but what I love about her is that she generates 2 power a turn because she's an Asgardian, and her throw costs 2 power, which means that every single turn I can throw someone off a secure objective, which is exactly what I want to do. The final slot in there, so I've got 3 points. I want someone with a throw. That has been Doc Ock recently, and I know there's a lot of people who don't give him a lot of love, but he's just great in this specific scenario. Recently, we've seen Drax as well. I'm still undecided whether I like Drax or Doc Ock more. I need to do a bit more playtesting. But there's my first 5 characters that are in my roster. And that 5th character of Doc Ock or Drax, that's maybe a bit of a flex, and I'm not quite sure where I'm landing on that. If you ask me right now, I've got a lot more practice with Doc Ock. If I was going to a tournament tomorrow, I'd love to do that. If I was going to a tournament tomorrow, I'd be taking Doc Ock in that position. His mobility is really good. And he can be threatening the far gamma shelter even on round 2, having gone wide to pick up and extract first.
Yeah, him having that extra range on his throw is really nice. Being have the range 3 instead of range 2 gives him that extra flexibility.
Yeah, the downside of the thing Drax got going for him is that he can throw size 3, and one of the weaknesses of the list is size 3 characters, because you're relying on Black Panther or Shuri to deal with them, because Valkyrie and Doc Ock can't. It's a slightly weird list because it doesn't really want to be attacking very much. You'll attack with Shuri for Panther gauntlets, you'll attack with Black Panther for his strikes to push people, but a lot of the time you're spending your time not attacking people, which in a miniatures war game feels a little weird, but it works really, really well. It's not uncommon for me to be on 5 or 6 victory points after round 1, and then to score 8 or 9 victory points in round 2. That's quite how it often pans out. So I've got this one list that I'm really, really happy with. I think it's very strong, and I've got a lot of practice with it. So that's been the foundation stone of my list building, of my roster building. If you have a list like that, you can, or a particular crisis that you're building to in specific, so here I'm talking about gamma shelters, you can play that about 50% of the time. Where you get to that number, half the time you get priority, and 2/3 of the time you have that crisis available to you. So that's 33% of the time you've got priority and you choose secures and you go, great, I managed to draw gamma shelters. 1/3 of the time you go, don't. So that's 16% of the time you're playing your backup crisis, which is fine. We'll talk about that in a minute. When your opponent gets priority, well, there's about half the time, roughly, all other things being equal, they're going to choose extracts, and half the time they're going to choose secures. And if they choose extracts, you get to choose secures, which means I still get to play gamma shelters if I draw it. So when you work out the maths of all of that, if you assume that they're even split between extracts and secures, I get to play the secure crisis I want half the time. So I'm building my list with the expectation that about half the time I get to play what I want in the secure crisis that I'm practiced into and that I think I'm advantaged in. So, having got to there and got a good strong list that I'm happy with, I'm now thinking, right, well, I've got Wakanda, I've got 5 characters already in there. Where am I going from here? The first thing is, okay, what if I'm on gamma shelters, but they put me in at like 17 threat instead? Well, there's a really simple thing I can do. I can swap out Okoye for Killmonger. Now, Okoye doesn't play to my game plan particularly. She doesn't have a push or a throw. She's not particularly offensive. She's just a good 2-threat in affiliation character. So by swapping her out and bringing Killmonger in, I've still got my 5 characters, which I like, so the chances are I'm going to be going last, which is what I want to be doing. But now I've got an extra character who is really good at removing people off a secure, not by pushing or throwing them, just by stabbing them a lot. Factor in that as well with his excellent Usurp the Throne Team's Tactics card, and suddenly I've got another way of scoring more victory points. And so I'm looking at going even faster on scenario. So he's definitely my 6th in my roster.
Absolutely.
So then I'm coming and going, right, I've got a plan A. Now I need to have formulated a plan B for those half the time when I'm not playing what I want to play. So what's the worst possible situation for Wakanda? And probably their worst secure is probably Deadly Meteors. So I'm thinking, right, I've got 6 spaces locked in. who can I put in for the other slots in my roster that can maybe give me a good game into Deadly Meteors? And I really like the Asgardians, and I've got the advantage. I've already included Valkyrie in my 6 I've already mentioned, because she was in my 5 for my Wakanda Wave list. So by including Thor, who is great, and in fact I will happily put Thor into my list. I'll upgrade Ock to Thor sometimes if I like the lay of the scenarios, because he's still got a throw and he can really dish out the damage if I want to turn the damage on. So I think that's a fair trade. So Thor can fit into my Wakandans, and he gives me my leadership ability for my Asgardians. And I like Loki as well on those on Meteors, just because he's got that lovely bubble of costing everybody extra power. So I've put Thor and Loki in my list, and I've got Valkyrie. So I'm thinking, right, well, I can do some things with that to build onto Meteors. And I've got characters like Black Panther, who's great on Meteors because he can be pushing people away off them. He's very durable, so when he gets into a bit of a brawl, he's a great character to bring in there. Or if I want to try and get ahead on VPs, maybe I'll bring in Killmonger. So I've got those sort of strong characters I can sub into my roster, sub into my list if I need to, if I do come up on Meteors. So now I'm up to 8, and I've got 2 slots left. And I'm thinking, well, we've covered Gamma Shelters, we've covered Meteors. Now I'm thinking about, okay, Infinity Formula. Infinity Formula, I think Wakanda's actually pretty good on Infinity Formula. It's another one where they can push people around and can try and control the secures. So I'm kind of happy with my Wakandan style lists on that, and I've got good options there. I'm going to add in a few more options as well for me in a minute, with one really important one, for when I'm talking about Extremists. Now, Extremists, again, I've written an article about Extremists, and I think there's certain characters that really shine on Extremists, and the 2 who stand out for me are Hawkeye and Corset Black Widow. Hawkeye's great because he can be sitting on that close defensive secure, scoring you a VP a turn or 2 VPs if he's managed to pick up an extract already. And he can then move, shoot, and then hook shot back into range, so he can be sitting, scoring you points while still contributing. Black Widow does kind of a similar thing. She sits on that central defensive secure, but she has got stealth, so that you have to come close if you want to deal with her. And if you do come close, you've got this choice of, do I stand close enough to contest the secure, in which case you're triggering her martial artist ability, and she becomes a lot harder to deal with when you look at the maths of that. Or you have to stand outside of range 2, but inside of range 3, and outside of range for interacting or contesting with the secure. So I really like her on that defensive secure in Extremis. So she goes in the list for me. I considered Hawkeye, but he doesn't really play to what I want to do in the other crises. And having another 2-threat character, I can just bump up my threat a little bit. If we're suddenly playing a 19, for example, I can take a 16 and maybe add her in. Or maybe I'm upgrading Ock to Thor. That's another possibility. So I've got 1 slot left, and there's 1 character who I think is fantastic in Wakanda, and I haven't mentioned yet, and that's Vision. Now, Vision is in there for another reason as well with Black Widow. So my Wakanda Wave, and I've written an article about this as well, there are certain things which are really good against my Wakanda Wave list, and one of them is to, okay, I've chosen Gamma Shelters. If you as my opponent, if you drop down the herbs extract, suddenly my scoring is going to be a lot slower. So I thought, well, what can I be doing to try and get that herb and maybe score it? And I thought, well, if I've got Black Widow running up and grabbing it turn 1, maybe at the end of the round, and then I've got Vision somewhere in the middle, Widow can move, Vision can drop her off, and she can get close to that to scoring 4 points for me.
Mm-hmm.
If you go, well, do you know what, I'm just going to take Widow out, I go, fantastic. You're having to divert resources from my central focus, which is winning the Gamma Shelters down the middle, and I can focus on that whilst you're sending someone who almost certainly costs more than 2-threat after a 2-threat character somewhere off to the side, and you're also taking damage from not being within the Gamma Shelters. If you leave her alone, even if you try and play, let's say, target Vision, and take Vision out of the game so I can't drop her off, she's still going to, if by under her own steam, she can get to the herb on turn 4. And if you just, that's all she does all game is run around with this herb. My plan A is win by turn 3. My contingency plan is score 4 points on turn 4, on round 4, sorry, so that I'm suddenly accelerated, hopefully, to a win. So I really like those swapping out for Doc Ock and Valkyrie on Wakanda Wave. So if I'm playing 15, I'll take my 2 unaffiliated and swap those 6 points of Valkyrie and Doc Ock for 6 points of core Black Widow and Vision. Vision plays to my game plan as well because he can generate his own power and he has a 2-cost throw, so he's very similar to Valkyrie. It's not quite as good, but he's plays in that kind of role.
Works out very well.
So that's my list of 10 characters. Then I got started thinking about team tactics cards. There's a setup which I really like for my Wakanda Wave team, which is Wakanda Forever. That's just a really, really strong tactics card. It's particularly great if I'm playing it late in the round and Shuri or Black Panther are pushing people away. I don't really mind if Okoye doesn't get any benefit out of it. Often that's enough just with Panther and Shuri. I really like field dressing with them because they're very squishy, that team. So having someone who can just pop back up, and typically by round 2 Shuri has enough power on her to be able to use field dressing, so I really like field dressing with it. Tactical analysis, one that I think a lot of people overlook, but if you're looking to play the scenario game on secures, being able to move someone who's been pushed or thrown off, that can be a big thing, and that can often score me 1 or 2 victory points just by using that at the right time. I like Brace for Impact just because my team's a bit squishy and I want to try and prevent that damage that's coming in at me. And my final one is Advanced R&D. Advanced R&D is actually really critical for a number of my plans because my team's quite power hungry, particularly characters like Doc Ock, who need 3 power to throw. Typically with Doc Ock, he's running off to pick up an extract, so turn 1 he spends the 1 power he's got. If you ignore him, round 2 he's on 1 power, and he's just sitting there going, well, it's going to be round 4. If nothing else happens, it's going to be round 4 before I can use my throw. Now, if he's using his strike and getting power, that can help him, and if he's being attacked, that can help him. But another thing that can be really useful is being able to go, he's 1 off, being able to throw, I'm going to move, and throw. Very often that's a play I use to get that far gamma shelter. So those are my 5 that I've got for Wakanda Wave. So I've only got 3 slots left. Now I've said I'm taking Asgardians, so one of them has got to be Odin's Blessing, and I've said I'm taking Killmonger, so pretty much one of them has got to be Usurp the Throne. So that only leaves me with 1 more. And the one I talked about as well, my plan for Vision with Black Widow, I need Drop Off in there, so that's my last one. Luckily, Drop Off plays really nicely with the Asgardians. My only sadness is that I can't fit in Get Help, Sibling Rivalry for the Asgardians, because I've got Thor and Loki, and it's a great card. It's a movement, it's damage, it's a stagger, it's a fantastic card. That would be my 9th card if I could have one.
And it is a really strong card. It has been snuck up on me a couple of times where it's a throw that's out of activation. It's a stagger that's out of activation that all does very nasty things if you're not keeping it in mind. Cool. So you have you've kind of worked down all of the different crisis cards, what you were looking for in the secures, and specifically, and I think I even go so far to really agree with you that if you have the option, I think it is smarter to pick the secure because you're outlining how that game is going to play. If you pick the Serum Infinity formula, you kind of say, okay, we're going to have 2 sides of the battlefield to go with. Maybe there's an exception for the Wakandan herbs because it is such a high scoring and very different kind of extraction objective. Mm-hmm. But I think the secures are definitely the way to go most of the time.
I think it hugely depends on your build. I think if I was building a Cabal roster, I'd probably be planning to choose extracts. I think they play really well on hammers, and I think they play really well on the civilian evacuation crisis. They, again, a bit like my Wakandan team, they want a fast game, but they are much better at targeting people and strategically KOing people or dazing them and picking up their extracts. So they can generate an advantage that way whilst also having a sideline in a secure game. So I'm not sure that, I think it does depend on the roster that you're building.
Fair.
What I haven't talked about is the extracts I choose, because 25% of the time I'm going to lose priority, and my opponent is going to go, no, 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 you're not going to get to pick secures. I'm doing that. All other things being equal. So what extracts am I taking? The things that I want to play into, again, I want to play fast. I want to have lots of points available. So I like Cosmic Cubes. I like Cosmic Cubes because there's lots of points available. I've also got Black Widow on my roster. She's a fantastic person to go and grab a cube and go and sit on a secure. She's just a great thing for her to do. That's probably my first choice. My second choice might be typically something like evacuees. Again, I want something fast, so that if I can have someone, I've got Vision in my list. Vision can then be building up the power, irrespective of anybody else doing anything else, so that he can evacuate someone. Also, I've got access to Killmonger. Killmonger can play that Cabal style. I'm going to go and get you and get a load of power and then evacuate this guy away. So those are my two picks. Now, I've only given you two because the third pick, I think, should always be a meta pick. Don't pick three extracts you like, because that third one you're never going to get to play. Here's the first extract is the one you want. 1 time out of 3, that's the one you discard, and you've got 2 left. The second one is your fallback. When do you ever pick the third one? So your third one should be for, okay, I see these guys have got this coming up on me, and I think I'm going to be advantaged if I pick this one. A great example for that is the Wakandan Herb. Like I said, my Wakanda team doesn't want to see the Wakandan Herb. It slows down the game hugely. Instead, another great one is Spider Infected. If they're going to be taking big characters like MODOK or Hulk, and you think you're going to be seeing those opposite you, then those are characters who really don't want to have a spider on them, because they're being pulled out of position, and essentially it's like a stagger to them, because they're having to use either power for Hulk or an action for MODOK to get back to where they want to be, making the attacks they want to make. So I would normally pick Spider Infected, because I like it. It's also quite fast, so it plays to my Wakandan idea as well. That's my backup meta pick. On the secure side, obviously I'm taking Gamma Waves, and I'm taking Meteors. That's my backup plan, is to go to the Asgardians. And I think Extremists is my meta pick, where some people's, if I have a look at a roster and I think, ooh, do you know what? I don't like Meteors. Maybe I'm going into an Avengers roster, and I don't want to play Meteors. I think that plays to their strength. But maybe Extremists, if they're not bringing Hawkeye or Black Widow, then maybe Extremists is a good one to go into them. So that would be my third secure pick, but I'm hoping to never play it.
Fair enough, and I think that's a really smart way to go about it, because and even if it's not something that you're playing in the meta sense of, oh, I think that this one is going to be bad for my opponent. Personally, I run Spider Infected almost as a bluff of, hey, like you don't want to give me the extractions because I'll pick Spider Infected, and most people hate playing against Spider Infected.
Yeah.
And which kind of then hopefully tilts it to me getting the blues as well. Awesome, man. So out of all of the different threats, you obviously have a couple of game plans at 15. You've got some game plans at 17. But then when we look at 18, 19, and 20, we know that there are specific extraction objectives that are being played at those points.
Mm-hmm.
At any of those, do you have a roster? It's like, cool, at 19, I know I want X characters because they build up that power for the evacuation, or anything like that?
It hugely, I mean, so Vision jumps out at me as one that can build up power easily, and he's in my roster. But it hugely depends on the secure that I'm playing as to the shape of my team. So a Meteors and Evacuees is going to be Asgardians. I really like the Asgardians and Meteors because they all start with 2 power, which means in round 1, they can go and get an extract and also go and interact with a Meteor, which means that you normally, and dice are a thing and dice happen, but you should normally kind of bank on winning the Meteors round 1. You should be even on extracts roughly, and you should be winning the Meteors. So you should be 3 VPs ahead at the end of round 1, and that can be a really good jumping off point into round 2. You've often got, sometimes you'll have all 3 Meteors as well, which can be hard for your opponent to overturn without you being able to un-overturn it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I love picking your brain on these things. You very obviously have thought through everything quite well. Asgardians playing really well with the Meteors, especially along with the extracts is not something I'd ever thought of, but does kind of just make this a natural sense of what you're trying to do with the team.
So for hammers for 18, again, it's going to depend on the extract. I'm very happy if my opponent's giving me hammers. If hopefully I'm on gamma shelters. I quite like that interaction. If it's at 18, then I'm mainlining my Wakandans, but I've got 3 threat to play with. So I would probably I know exactly what I do. I'd upgrade Okoye to Killmonger, and I'd upgrade Vision. So then I've got even more maneuverability and throws and more damage potential. So that would be my 18.
Yep, and those characters also benefit from those extra dice that they would be getting. And the last one to touch on then is the 20 threat, because there's only one extract, and that also will very much so slow down the game because it's even only 2 points for that extract. Does that change your mentality at all?
So if it's not one I'm ever going to pick, 'cause it's not in my list. So this is my opponent picking extract, so I'm picking secures. If it's gamma shelters, we go Wakandan, and we possibly have Killmonger and Okoye in there, which can leverage out a bit more Wakanda Forever. So I get 4 characters that can potentially attack off it. Again, I want to make sure try to make sure I'm outnumbering my opponent so I can act last and get those end of round pushes or throws that are going to score me the points on the secures. But if I've had to zag into meteors, then I'll be playing as Guardians, and I would have Vision in there with my Asgardians as well, and probably Black Panther.
Makes sense. I like the lineup there.
Thor.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's cool. And Vision into Meteors is an interesting one because a lot of people think, okay, he's only got 2 energy defense because his phasing doesn't actually boost his defense, it just gives him extra dice. But the throw and the beam are both really good on that. People tend to line up on Meteors, so you can hit quite a lot from the beams.
Yep, same on gamma shelters. I'm sure Vision is able to do disgusting things there as well. Awesome, man. Well, I know it is super late over there. Thank you again for taking some time to come on, talk about everything you've been doing and kind of strategizing while we have not gotten as many games as we would like to play, probably with the quarantine around the world and all that kind of stuff. But one more time, if you will, shout out where people can find a lot of your content and information.
Yeah, if you go to Google and type in Xavier Protocols blog, it'll be the first one comes up, or xavier-protocols.com.
Perfect. And if nothing else, I'll have a link to both his just base website, blog, down in the description below, along with a couple of recommended links of some of my favorite articles that you've written. Awesome. Well, everybody, thank you for watching/listening, because I know that these are oh so much fun to watch. But it's good stuff to maybe paint and all that stuff too. But until next time, guys, thanks for watching and keep on gaming.